Open Stax Psychology Chapter 7 continued, Section 7.5 Measures of Intelligence. While you're likely familiar with the term IQ and associate it with the idea of intelligence, what does IQ really mean? IQ stands for Intelligence Quotient and describes a score earned on a test designed to measure intelligence. You've already learned that there are many ways psychologists describe intelligence. Similarly, IQ tests, the tools designed to measure intelligence, have been the subject of debate throughout their development and use. When might an IQ test be used? What do we learn from the results, and how might people use this information? IQ tests are expensive to administer and must be given by a licensed psychologist. Intelligence testing has been considered both a bane and a boon for education of social policy. In this section, you will explore what intelligence tests measure, how they are scored, and how they were developed. Measuring intelligence. It seems that the human understanding of intelligence is somewhat limited when we focus on traditional or academic type intelligence. How then can intelligence be measured? And when we measure intelligence, how do we ensure that we capture what we're really trying to measure? In the following paragraphs, we will explore the how intelligence tests were developed and history of their use. The IQ test has been synonymous with intelligence for over a century. In the late 1800s, Sir Francis Galton developed the first broad test of intelligence. Although he was not a psychologist, his contributions to the concepts of intelligence testing are still felt today. Reliable intelligence testing began in earnest during the early 1900s when a researcher named Olvera-Dena was asked by the French government to develop an intelligence test to use on children to determine which ones might have difficulties in schools. It included many verbal-based tasks. American researchers soon realized the value of such testing. Louis Terman, a Stanford professor, modified Bennett's work by standardizing the administration of the test and tested thousands of different age children to establish an average score for each age. As a result, the test was normed and standardized, which means that the test was administered constantly to a large enough representative sample of the population that the range of scores resulted in a bell curve. Standardization means that the manner of administration, scoring, and interpretation of the results is consistent. Norming involves giving a test to a large population so data can be collected comparing groups such as age groups. The resulting data provides approved norms or referential scores by which to interpret future scores. Norms are not expectations of what a given group should know, but a demonstration of what that group does know. Norming and standardizing the test ensures that new scores are reliable. This new version of the test was called the Stanford-Binet Intelligence Scale. Remarkably, an updated version of this test is still widely used today. In 1939, David Wechsler, a psychologist who spent part of his career working with World War I veterans, developed a new IQ test in the U.S. Wechsler combined several subtests from other intelligence tests used between 1880 and World War I. These subtests tapped into a variety of verbal and nonverbal skills because Wechsler believed that intelligence encompassed the global capacity of a person to act purposefully, to think rationally, and to deal effectively with his environment. He named the test the Wechsler-Bellevue Intelligence Scale. This combination of subtests became one of the most extensively used intelligence tests in the history of psychology. Although its name was later changed to the Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale and has been revised several times, the aims of the test remains virtually unchanged since its inception. Today, there are 3 intelligence tests credited to Wechsler's and Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale 4th edition. The Wechsler Intelligence Scale for Children and the Wechsler Preschool and Primary School Scale of Intelligence. These tests are used widely in scales and communities throughout the U.S. and they are periodically normed and standardized as a means of recalibration. Interestingly, the periodic recalibrations have led to an interesting observation known as the Flynn effect. Named after James Flynn, who was among the first to describe this trend, the Flynn effect refers to the observation that each generation has a significantly higher IQ than the last. Flynn himself argues that increased IQ scores do not necessarily mean that younger generations are more intelligent per se. As a part of the recalibration process, the WISC-5 was given to thousands of children across the country, and children taking the test today are compared with the same age peers. The WISC-5 is composed of 14 subtests, which comprise 5 indices, which then render an IQ score. The 5 indices are verbal comprehensions, visual spatials, fluid reasoning, working memory, and processing speed. When the test is complete, individuals receive a score for each of the 5 indices and a full-scale IQ score. The method of scoring reflects the understanding that intelligence is comprised of multiple abilities in several cognitive realms and focus on the mental process. Focus on the mental process that the child used to arrive at his or her answer to each test item. Ultimately, we are still left with the question of how valid intelligence tests are. Certainly, the most modern versions of these tests tap into more than verbal competencies. Yet the specific skills that should be assessed in IQ testing, the degree to which any test can truly measure an individual's intelligence, and use of the results of IQ tests are still issues of debate. The bell curve. The results of intelligence tests follows the bell curve, a graph in the general shape of a bell. When the bell curve is used in psychological testing, the graph demonstrates a normal distribution of a trait, in this case, intelligence in the human population. Many human traits naturally follow the bell curve. For example, if you lined up all of your female schoolmates according to height, it is likely that a large cluster of them would be the average height of an American woman, 5'4" to 5'6". This cluster would fall into the center of the bell curve, representing the average height for the American woman. There would be fewer women who stand closer to 4'11". The same would be true for women of above average height, those who stand closer to 5'11". The trick to finding a bell curve in nature is to use a large sample size. Without a large sample size, it is less likely that the bell curve will represent the wider population. A representative sample is a subset of the population that accurately represents the general population. If, for example, you measure the height of women in your class only, you might not actually have a representative sample. Perhaps the women's basketball team wanted to take this course together, and they are all in your class. Because basketball players tend to be taller than average, the women in your class may not be a good representative sample of the population of the American women. But if your sample included all women at your school, it is likely that their heights would form a natural bell curve. The same principle applies to intelligence test scores. Individuals earn a score called an intelligence quotient, an IQ. Over the years, different types of IQ tests have evolved, but the way scores are interpreted remains the same. The average IQ score on an IQ test is 100. Standard deviation describes how data are dispersed in a population and give context to a large data sets. The bell curve uses the standard deviation to show how all scores are dispersed from the average score. In modern IQ testing, one standard deviation is 15 points, so a score of 85 would be described as one standard deviation below the mean. How would you describe a score of 115 and a score of 70? Any IQ score that falls within one standard deviation above and below the mean, between 85 and 115, is considered average, and 68% of the population has an IQ score in this range. An IQ score of 130 or above is considered a superior level. Only 2.2% has an IQ score below 70. A score of 70 or below indicates significant cognitive delays. When these are combined with major deficits in adaptive functioning, a person is diagnosed with having an intellectual disability. Formerly known as mental retardation, the accepted terms now is intellectual disability, and it has 4 subtypes: mild, moderate, severe, and profound. The Diagnosis and Statistical Manual of Psychological Disorder lists criteria for each subgroup. On the other end of the intelligence spectrum are those individuals whose IQs fall into the highest ranges. Consistent with the bell curve, about 2% of the population falls into this category. People are considered gifted if they have an IQ score of 130 or higher, or superior intelligence in a particular area. Long ago, popular beliefs suggested that people of high intelligence were maladjusted. This idea was disproven through a groundbreaking study of gifted children. In 1921, Louis Terman began a longitudinal study of over 1,500 children with IQs over 135. His findings showed that these children became well-educated, successful adults who were, in fact, well-adjusted. Additionally, Terman's study showed that the subjects were above average in physical build and attractiveness, dispelling an earlier popular notion that highly intelligent people were weaklings. Some people with very high IQs elect to join Mensa, an organization dedicated to identifying, researching, and fostering intelligence. Members must have an IQ score in the top 2% of the population, and they may be required to pass other exams in their application to join the group. Why measure intelligence? The value of IQ testing is most evident in educational or clinical settings. Children who seem to be experiencing learning difficulties or severe behavioral problems can be tested to ascertain whether the child's difficulties can be partly attributed to an IQ score that is significantly different from the means for her age group. Without IQ testing or another measure of intelligence, children and adults needing extra support might not be identified effectively. In addition, IQ testing is used in courts to determine whether a defendant has special or extenuating circumstances that preclude him from participating in some way in a trial. People also use IQ testing results to seek disability benefits from the Social Security Administration. While IQ tests have sometimes been used as arguments in support of insidious purposes, such as the eugenist movements, the following case study demonstrates the usefulness and benefits of IQ testing. Candace, a 14-year-old girl experiencing problems at school, was referred for a court-ordered psychological evaluation. She was in regular education classes in the 9th grade and was failing every subject. Candace had never been a stellar student but had always been passed to the next grade. Frequently, she would curse at any of her teachers who called on her in class. She also got into fights with other students and occasionally shoplifted. When she arrived for the evaluation, Candace immediately said that she hated everything about school, including the teachers, the rest of the staff, the building, and the homework. Her parents stated that they felt their daughter was picked on because she was of a different race than the teachers and most of the other students. When she asked why she cursed at her teachers, Candace replied, "They only call on me when I don't know the answer. I don't know what to say. I don't want to say I don't know all of the time, and I look like an idiot in front of my friends. The teachers embarrass me." She was given a battery of tests, including an IQ test. Her score on the IQ test was 68. What does Candace's score say about her ability to excel or even succeed in regular education classes without assistance?